Welcome back to Newsfeed PM. I am Masachaba Kumalo. 31 states and 19 national societies gathered in Pretoria to discuss the implementation of international humanitarian law in their countries. The Commonwealth, Red Cross and Red Crescent Conference on International Humanitarian Law takes place every 4 years. The sixth installment is hosted by the International Red Cross, South African Red Cross Society, in partnership with the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Discussions have been centered on best practice that work, all in the name of humanity. To discuss, I'm now joined by Jules Amoti, who is the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross in Southern Africa. Jules, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you as well for welcome for this time to discuss together.
Now, with Southern Africa being a mostly calm zone, what are some of the key activities in that particular region?
Yes, ICRC has a lot of activities in Southern Africa, including in South Africa, on the promotion of humanitarian law, because this is one of our main principles and mandate as an organization, and to make sure that the state in Southern Africa have their national IHL committees, and to make sure that also they understand this legal body of the law and promote them in their domestic law. This is one aspect that we do to promote it within Southern Africa, but also we discuss with different stakeholders involved in South Africa sometime on the military operations to prepare the troops on the IHL training on the application of the international humanitarian law to prepare when deploying under SADC troops as in DRC, in Mozambique. Also to support other UN missions, we brief them on the application of humanitarian law. But besides, we work as well around the protection of the family links, because South Africa also have a lot of people on move, and then we see how we help them to maintain the links with their families, staying home. Also on the forensic side, on the dead and the missing. This is in a nutshell what we do in Southern Africa with the great support of different states in this region.
Now, Jules, please elaborate on humanitarian diplomacy that you use to carry out, or to highlight rather, humanitarian concerns in other parts of the world.
Yes, on the humanitarian diplomacy side, it's first to engage with the state to remind the situation happening mainly in the armed conflict and the suffering of the civilians and those not take part in the hostilities, to make sure that the international humanitarian law can better promoted, respected and complied with by all stakeholders, or armies and non-state armies taking part in hostilities. This is one thing that we do, and then we leverage on the position of some states in Southern Africa, like South Africa, just to remind how the voice of humanitarian and those trapped in the conflict zone can be heard in order to comply with the IHL, and to remind there's legal obligations for state and non-state armed groups as well. And this contributes to alleviate the suffering of the populations.
And we understand that the conference was an opportunity to celebrate the 75th Geneva Conventions. Are they still relevant, especially considering that the world is battling out armed conflict?
Yes, the Geneva Convention remain very relevant, because this is the only law arbitrating for armed conflict situation. And we cannot discuss on the, let's say, conflict situation, how we protect the civilians and those who not fight, without evoking the Geneva Conventions. This legal body remains very relevant. And today, there are many questions around the relevance of the Geneva Conventions, but the Geneva Convention stands a very relevant law, and many states are signatories to the Geneva Conventions. We just remind that the law must be respected and applied.
All right. Could you elaborate for us a little bit further, Mr. Amoti, on how the Geneva Conventions remain relevant, especially in our current climate?
Yes, the Geneva Convention remain relevant because of the four principles. The one is the principle of humanity. We focus on human being, and the objective is to alleviate the suffering of the human being. The second is the principle of distinction. We know when the hostilities take place, we remind the stakeholders there must be distinctions between the civilians and those who take part in the hostilities. Civilian object and military objective must be well distinguished. This is very important under Geneva Conventions. And then we have the principle of proportionality, the way the war must also be handled by respecting this principle. And the last is the necessity. Why to continue to make the situation of the civilians really unlivable in the conflict zone and necessary suffering, while that can be preserved just by respecting the law. And then besides, we know today it became too complex in the armed conflict because of the technologies, new warfare, digital warfare, compliance with the IHL in the protection of environment in the conflict zone. All of these complexities are bringing more suffering to the civilian population, where we remind that under the Geneva Conventions, all the states have obligations to comply with these bodies of law.
All right. And also, lastly, could you take us through some of the key outcomes of the conference?
Yes, one of the outcomes, we had a chance to have a representative from the government, different governments around the world. They came to Pretoria, the national societies of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, from different countries to discuss on the IHL issues, to see what is happening in their specific context. It was a good time to share information, to share experience as well. But also, as we are heading to the 34th International Conference of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, that will take place in October in 2024 in Geneva. All states now have the draft resolution of the things to be brought there, and to see how this resolution can be finalized and adopted in order to promote the application of the international humanitarian law, as well as other issues like how to better manage disasters, because you can see today the world is facing a lot of disaster issues, and through these resolutions it can contribute as well to improve the humanitarian responses that the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, which is the largest network of the humanitarian in the world, because we have today 192 national societies of the Red Cross with several millions of volunteers working around the world to provide aid to those who are affected. I think this was a very good time to prepare for the coming conference, but also to mobilize the states, not only in Africa, around the world, because participants come from all different sides of the world to get prepared for this big event that will take place in Geneva. And we really thank all the South Africa and the different stakeholders who convened this event with us together to make it happen.
Thank you so much for your time, Jules. And Jules Amoti is the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross in Southern Africa, talking to us there about the conference. Of course, this really offers a space to discuss continued relevance around the Geneva Conventions and pressing thematic issues pertaining to war veterans, pertaining to the protections of people and objects, sexual violence, the separated and missing, and the dignified treatment of the dead during armed conflict, amongst many other issues as well.